So we were talking earlier, my guest and I, offline, and both of us have felt kind of this same vibe lately. And that is that there is an issue with what we're referring to as a leadership vacuum, right? So either there's a need for leadership in these spaces, or there is deficient leadership in these spaces, bad leadership, or non-existent leadership. And I don't know, quite frankly, Chris, which is worse, but we'll get into that. But we both know the alternative is good leadership. Speaking of good leadership, let me introduce my guest, Chris Leal. Chris, you're the first guest I've had on the show that I didn't know personally, but I feel like I know you now that we've been talking. Chris has been busy. Former director at Sirius XM, done a lot of executive coaching, which is an interesting thing to do, where you're talking with executives who are talking to other people. So Chris was kind of like the voice in their ear, giving them advice on how to communicate. Currently, he's in corporate research with the Brunswick Group, which is a European group. He's into finance, lots of that kind of thing. But we're here today to talk about leadership, and particularly this idea of a leadership vacuum. But Chris, welcome to the show. We're glad you're here.
Thank you, Brandon, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And let's jump into this topic of a leadership vacuum. For the viewers who may not have heard that term before or even thought along those lines, what does that mean to you when you say, I feel like in our society right now, we have a leadership vacuum? What does that mean?
Yeah, it really does. It feels like we're in this age of leadership vacuums. More and more as I started looking around and thinking about all of these major structural crises we have going on, but the solutions to them, they're not exactly unknown, or they're not even quote unquote rocket science. I mean, it's not like people are here saying we need to study this issue and figure it out. It's too often it's just a lack of will and leadership. And I think it really was illuminating for me then, because then when you look around, you realize people are hungry and maybe even desperate for leadership in all of these spaces. So,
well, Chris, I have good news for you. AI is going to solve everything, apparently. So we're going to let the machines take over this leadership. And maybe that's what it is. We're just kind of waiting for them to step up. So good news. You're not going to have to worry about this anymore. No, I'm with you. I'm with you on this. What do you think? How does this manifest itself? Because that's what I'm kind of curious as to your take on. What does this look like? Let's just start with business and kind of focus on that, since most of our viewers are coming from that space. What does a lack of leadership look like in a business setting to you?
Sure. Well, I'm going to start a little more macro and then we'll work into, some specific businesses. But you touched on things like AI, and sort of the era of monopolization that we have going on, right? And what does that mean for employment? We have things that, now more and more executives are talking about, like they call it the bifurcation of the economy, from a consumer standpoint. Our economy, 75% of our GDP is people going out and buying things. And, wages have been flat for half a century. There's, people are strapped. This has been debt fueled, and there's a lot of kicking the can. And those aren't even necessarily moral or political issues. It's just a mechanical issue. This is how the economy works. Very smart people are talking about it, and no one's doing anything about it. On Wall Street, our stock valuations are, untethered, from reality and historical norms. People like Warren Buffett and other hedge fund people have been trying to call, the top or a correction or a crash for over a decade now, and are being humbled by it. And so I think that just boils down to within companies. It's just there are all these issues, and what are people going to do about it? And if you talk about within an organization and motivating employees, unfortunately today, a lot of the corporate strategy, and this isn't even hyperbole, but a lot of the corporate strategy is to gobble up, acquire your competitors, and buy back your own stock, which is something that used to be illegal until the 1980s, and figure out how to cut costs, which when you think about, really zoom out, think about what leadership is, right? Definitionally. I'm sure this is something that comes up, but I looked up this definition before, but it's the ability to guide and motivate individuals towards achieving a common goal. How are you motivating people with that? I think that if you're talking about a leader and trying to lead and inspire an organization, where is the inspiring message there?
Yeah, it's interesting though. I'm kind of looking at it and I'm imagining I'm one of those people that are benefiting from this. And then I would say, Chris, this is by design. So the companies you just mentioned, they're looking at it and going, hey, we're doing a hell of a job here. Like we're taking care of our people at the top. We're taking care of our shareholders. And this is absolutely by design. So it's not that we don't have leadership. Flipping it around, though, is the definition of leadership. And I was listening to your definition very closely. And I think that definition in and of itself could align with what some of these people are doing. They're getting their strategic operations focused on a common goal, which is to benefit, not to get into too much about it, but the 1%. But I'm more with you that the heart of leadership is what's missing. And the heart of it should be to benefit your people, the people that have been put in your charge. But I could also see how they could come in and go, hey, we're leading just fine, my friend. We are leading right onto the yacht, bro. Come on, come follow us. That's where we're going, right?
100%. I mean, don't get me wrong, on paper and the numbers, right? Like Wall Street is getting paid their fees, and the executives in either companies are getting paid their bonuses based off of it. But overall in the economy, since 1973, wages are flat in this country, which again, I was just saying, if you want to remove any sort of morality or ethical issues there, we have an economic machine, and this is how it works. And 3/4 of the machine is regular people going out and having money to spend to businesses, right? And to keep things going. And so it's just not sustainable. We've gotten by for a while, largely with debt. And you've seen that credit card rates at all-time highs, even corporate debt across the economy. But none of these things are sustainable. It's sort of like, it feels like musical chairs, and the music is still going when everyone knows there's not enough chairs, and they know the music is going to stop at some point, but no one really wants to do anything right now because, the music's going. I mean, why address it?
You can't have infinite growth in a finite space, right? I think that's a term or a phrase I've heard before. And the only time you see that is with things like cancer, where you have unlimited growth, but you have a finite space, so you end up dying from it. And
exactly.
When we approach our economic climate with this idea of infinite growth within a non-infinite or a finite space, obviously the resources are going to run out at some point. How does better leadership provide the antidote to that, in your opinion?
The thing is you're really going to need it in both the public and the private sectors, because some of these things are systemic, and companies have an obligation to run their companies and have limited, sometimes levers and incentives to operate within that space. And so I think from a corporate standpoint, paying higher wages is good. They view that as a creeping expense. But guess what? Your employees are customers, and and even if they work for another company, they're your customers. And that's how it works. When they might say, look, at one point they say we can't pay people more, and they're literally laying people off. And also we live at a time where corporate profits are at all-time highs. This has been talked about now. They're literally at all-time highs as a percentage of the economy. And so where does that money go, right? It's, like I said, stock buybacks, which is basically shuffling money around, financial engineering, which may have its roles in certain places, but that shouldn't be, if that is your primary strategy in creating value, that's the sort of thing that isn't sustainable over a certain amount of time.
You're saying there needs to be more leadership that is representing the interests of not just the workers, and we're not going to get into this sort of capital versus labor, but your consumers. So if you are not paying your employees, or if you're laying off your employees for the sake of automation, but you're still expecting those people to be participating in the market as consumers, that's what you're saying here. It's not sustainable. If I'm company A and I have 100,000 employees and I lay off 90,000 of them because I could do it with AI, those 90,000 are no longer consumers of not just my products, but all products, right? They have to dial back their spending. And so what you're saying is this is sort of the snake eating its tail type of issue here, where we are hurting ourselves by not providing leadership that benefits our employees and consumers as a whole.
Yeah, 100%. With that example you gave, that's, really perfect. That is a looming issue. One of these big, crises facing us is, what is AI going to do? And people thought it would just be minimal, low wage jobs, but now we're seeing it's even mid-level software engineers, right? Even Silicon Valley was laying off all these people. It's what about artists and even doctors? People talk about it, lawyers. So it's a lot bigger than people expect. And And the people that are developing this, technology are very eager to put it out there. And so you think, okay, well, if in the example you gave, you're a company and you could lay off 90% or even half or whatever, some number of your workforce, and replace it with AI. That's great. You would think for your profits, but you're assuming that your revenue is staying the same. And if that is happening across the economy, all of a sudden you have a lot of people that aren't going to be able to go and give you that revenue anymore. And so it's tough. And so far, the AI stuff is really sort of freshly on the horizon, but that is just in a microcosm, a great example of, a lot of other things that are tough to deal with in the short term, but are going to have serious long-term consequences.
So what does a solution look like? If we're talking about this leadership vacuum, we need leaders to step up and represent the interests of human beings. We'll just say that. What do I do if I'm a new leader? I'm a new manager in an organization. I've just been promoted to a management position. I've been told that my job is if you're a manager, to generate profit for the organization. How do I balance that with the needs of my team?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because you would thinking systematically and thinking logically, a system that produces that leader, someone as a leader, is going to be one of the most invested people in that system that made them a leader, that gave them that position. So what incentive do you really have just at a base level in trying to materially or seriously change that system that has personally worked very well for you? Unless you can think about this, right? And sort of get outside of your immediate perspective and think about all the puzzle pieces on the table and how they fit together. But that is tough to do.
And it sounds like you're talking about the inspirational side of leadership, the part of that leadership that conveys the message that you as a leader care about the well-being of the people that are in your charge. Simon Sinek talks a lot about that in Leaders Eat Last and Start With Why and books like that. I'm a huge fan of that. In fact, I'm such a fan of it that I say these days, when people find a leader like that, those are the ones they gravitate to. It's understood that your leader should be able to do the technical side of their job, but it's not understood, to your point about this whole thing. We're missing the inspirational leaders that use that pull leadership as opposed to push leadership. Right. Push is the sticks, pull is the carrots, if you will. And getting buy-in and getting people to understand the message and, like you said, the sort of the overarching philosophy of the organization, but it has to come back to the people.
Think about that definition of leadership, right? Guiding and motivating individuals or groups to achieving a common goal. And I think about, we live in a society, especially in the last 40 years, that's been not just pushing atomization and individualization, but hyper individualization, right? And then you talk about toward a common goal. And I collectively, do we even have how many common goals?
Yeah. As we kind of start to wrap up here, I'm kind of putting some puzzle pieces together in my own head, because I think about these type of issues a lot. And I feel like in this world of automation and AI and LLMs that we're just starting to scratch the surface of, I'm with what Mark Cuban said a few weeks ago, and that was that the pendulum is going to swing back the other direction towards what you mentioned, which was that connection. And I feel like companies that are able to create a true sense of community, not just this, oh, we're a family, but we'll fire you for not towing the line or whatever, but a true sense of community engagement within the organization, but also engaging with the community at large. They need to understand that people are humans. They need that understanding. They need you to use emotional intelligence as a leader and aside from just knowing how to do the technical side of your job. If you like what Chris has said and you're on board with it and want to get him to bring some education to your organization or get you involved in your local community, his information is going to be here in the description of the podcast episode. So thanks, Chris, for being here today. I think we've touched on a lot of interesting stuff. I'm not sure we got to the point where we're solving it, but I think we're going in the right direction, though, brother. Thank you, viewers and supporters of the podcast. We're really excited for what's been happening, what's going to happen with the show. Thanks for being here, and again, say hi anytime. leave a comment, subscribe, do all the stuff that we do these days on social media. So, all right. Thank you very much.